Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. As you well know, you can get forecast information at least into the afternoon there, with clouds kind of lingering up over areas of the Arctic coast, but nothing too serious. And then low pressure dropping back to the southwest there over the Bering Sea. And for today, actually another system right there you can see is rolling on down towards Shemya, with the main low center right here, the anchor low just south of Atka Island. So southeast flow keeping it showery over the Alaska Peninsula, western Alaska Peninsula, mainly the Aleutians there, eastern Aleutians, Fox Islands, with some showers and cloudy skies. Just a weak band of clouds right through here with some light precipitation associated with that. Another band right there also has some showers and rain with that, mostly along the coast of the Kenai Peninsula. Some of that trying to get up into Prince William Sound on the west side there, and then enhancing again in the upslope areas, western Cook Inlet and the Alaska Range, but then breaking out on the east side of the west side of the mountains in that easterly flow. See quite a few breaks here all the way out to the Yukon Delta, and then some clouds shifting up to the north and northeast, spreading in up toward the Fairbanks area this afternoon, but generally precipitation free. Back into the clearing skies there for the Yukon Flats, actually from North Waytoke up to Eagle, and then back to the northwest out there. And then there were some low clouds here, possible flurries there on the eastern Arctic coastline. And down on the Panhandle, some showers going on, but those kind of tapering off, mostly down over the southern areas. More sun as you head north there, especially into the Yukon. Whitehorse Delta from Juneau northward, seeing a fair amount of sun. And on the chart today, you can see mostly clear skies here from the Kobuk Valley, actually from about Noatak eastward and then southeastward, with this mostly mid and high level clouds spreading in across the Alaska Range, and then breaking up down through this area here. And then the precipitation again right along the Kenai Peninsula to the western Alaska Range on down to the South Shelikof Strait, mostly on the Aleutian Range, on the Shelikof side, the Shelikof Strait side of the Aleutian Range, and not much getting into King Salmon, just a lot of cloudiness, but areas of rain there along the Alaska Peninsula with that frontal boundary, and more showery conditions behind it here for the Aleutians. Just some scattered isolated showers for Adak and Atka. Winds on the increase north-northeast out towards Shemya, 30 to 40 mile an hour gusts out there. And that band of winds extends northeastward there, and actually all the way up into the Chukchi Sea. Otherwise, we had those flurries, areas of fog, continued light winds on the Arctic coast, but gradually starting to pick up here over the Chukchi Sea and then southward, but light wind conditions over the eastern interior right down into the Gulf of Alaska. And of course, with that weak trough over the southeast coast, not much in the way of any heavy precipitation or wind going on. And for tonight, that front continues to elongate off to the southeast there, so it's not going to be swinging up into the southeast coast at all. Kind of a weak area, high pressure developing near the Queen Charlotte, so we'll hold it back, but we still have that southeasterly flow, keeping it cloudy and occasionally wet. Some of that moisture, again, could work up into western Prince William Sound, Portage, say, and then down the coast again, same pattern we saw here through yesterday through today is going to continue through tonight with that frontal boundary in the vicinity of Kodiak there. So occasional rain, definitely cloudy, and some areas of fog as well. But areas of rain also back across the southwest, mostly, well, Bristol Bay to the Aleutian Range, and that same pattern up the west side of Cook Inlet there. Probably not reaching rainy pass at all with any precipitation or lower flying conditions, probably staying VFR. But areas of marginal VFR here along the coastline. Pribilof's getting on the south side of the front, so any rain going on there will become probably end or just a few scattered showers with lighter winds. Strongest winds still occurring here from the western Arctic coast, roughly about Point Lay, on down through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island. So all the stronger winds back out to the west there, coming down west of Kiska Island to Shimia and Attu. And then for tomorrow, the whole frontal boundary shifts up to the north here. Not too strong at all, but some areas of rain would be the way to describe it here for the green shaded areas. That's the best chance, and it'll just be periods of light rain or showers back up, maybe reaching St. Lawrence Island, probably staying to the south though, and then definitely north of the Pribilofs there. Light winds with this large low pressure center there continuing south of Atka. So just some scattered showers and 10 to 20 mile per hour winds at the most from the south-southeast. Stronger though winds continuing out west there towards Shimia, and that moisture continues to come up to the North Gulf Coast, mostly in the form of showers here from about Cordova eastward into the Panhandle, where they become quite isolated and scattered, and probably see some partial clearing as well. But any moisture that gets north as far as the Susitna Valley will be of the shower or sprinkle variety and not too significant, but it'll become a little heavier and more persistent as you head on down south toward Iliamna and then back along the front through this area. So just fairways inland, precipitation will be quite light if it occurs at all. And then to the north, there'll be precipitation free with very cloudy skies and gusty winds through the passes of the Central Brooks Range back out to the west, and then staying quite breezy here for the Noatak Valley areas right down across the western Seward Peninsula. Could see gusts of 40 miles an hour or so through the Bering Strait, and breezy for St. Lawrence Island, but not all that strong on the winds there. And the Arctic coast with the offshore flow, that's where you'll see the best flying conditions. And there's probably some marginal VFR hanging on to the east side there at times with some lower clouds and fog. And then for the outlook for Tuesday, not much change in that pattern up there with a big high near Wrangel Island, clockwise flow around that, continuing that northeast onshore flow. So the east side here, looking at surges of low clouds, fog and flurries coming on down right onto the eastern north slope to possibly the crest of the Brooks Range. South of the mountains though, mostly clear skies from the northern Koyukuk Valley out to the west. Keep it windy here for the western Arctic coast. Again, Point Lay on down across the Chukchi Sea to the Bering Strait. Looks like a little less wind now for St. Lawrence Island. Quite light winds here for the southwest coast. Very weak trough. Band of leftover moisture here, remnants of that frontal boundary, mostly along the coast. Periods of light rain or showers, and I emphasize the light, with scattered showers back toward Kodiak Island. And then the main low really not moving much and not much of a gradient with it at all. Still 987 millibars. So tight enough to keep those northerly winds out west there going pretty good, but under gale force, just small craft advisories. And we still have that same pattern of moisture flowing along this trough right up to the North Gulf Coast. Cloudy skies, occasional light rain, showers into Prince William Sound, mostly along the southern Kenai Peninsula up into western Prince William Sound and back across the southern Kenai Peninsula into Iliamna, and also up the west side of Cook Inlet a certain extent. Otherwise, just some isolated scattered rain or snow showers. Call that from the White Mountains on northeastward, maybe back toward the Seward Peninsula, but that's about it. And a stronger storm here developing and moving up toward the Queen Charlotte Islands. So that's going to make for a pretty nice day here across the southeast coast. Mostly sunny skies, light winds. Late in the day, seeing an increase in the clouds down south as that system approaches. but looking pretty good through most of the day down that way. Temperatures today for the Panhandle, mostly in the upper 50s to lower 60s once again. 63 at Stewart. The warmer locations chop 11 degrees off of that at AKwx, while 54 there at Petersburg, Wrangell up to 62, and a 56-degree reading at Skagway, 57 Yakutat, 54 at Cordova. Upper 50s across areas of the Copper River Basin as well as the Susitna Valley at Talkeetna, up to 57. Lower 50s, Cook Inlet, Anchorage, Palmer, all the way down to Homer, and 46 at Seward. Otherwise, Kodiak Island, lower 40s this afternoon, and then lower 50s up in the Tanana Valley with Fairbanks and Eagle, both up to 52, and 42 back to the west a little bit there at Tanana. Up along the Yukon Flats, Fort Yukon, 40 above zero, 42 at Bettles, with Anaktuvik at 27 above, and temperatures kind of a range here from 0 to 20 above along the Arctic coast, with 1 degree at Deadhorse and Barter Island at 13 in Kaktovik, 9 degrees at Wainwright, and then up to 15 to almost 20 degrees down toward Cape Lisburne. Upper 20s to upper 30s here over the northwest, 37 at Kotzebue, 40 degrees Nome. And farther to the south, we've got Route Northern Bering, 29 at, let's see, that's Gamble. Lower 40s along the Yukon Delta coast, mid 50s for the Kuskokwim Valley with 54 at McGrath. That same temperature matched also at Bethel. Bering Sea, Pribilofs, 38 St. Paul, 41 St. George, and a 43-degree reading there at Unalaska. That Atka temperature is probably looking a little warm again like it did last week or the week before, but 39 at Adak probably is more accurate, 43 at Shimia. And then lower 40s here for the peninsula, warm into the mid-50s up toward King Salmon. And for the temperatures, lows tonight back down below zero in some areas from the Brooks Range on out toward the Arctic coast, right around zero there for the central coast. Teens in the northwest, 20s, southern Seward Peninsula, eastward to the Tanana Valley, then dropping back into the teens over the extreme eastern interior. But pretty mild night tonight, upper 30s, lower 40s in the forecast here for southern Alaska, south central Alaska down to the North Gulf Coast. Same thing for the Panhandle, 30s for the Aleutians. And for tomorrow's highs, again, 50s to lower 60s here through the central and southern interior. Mid-50s for the southeast coast, 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, coldest north of the Brooks Range, but all above zero. And for flying weather, again, areas IFR, western Arctic coast eastward, and also kind of working up or being persistent right through here with that southeast wind flow, and that's even going to catch the southern Kenai Peninsula. Just a patch IFR, happens to be right in the vicinity of the Pribilofs out over the Bering Sea, and marginal VFR continuing for the southeast coast. And then tomorrow afternoon, that diminishes but hangs in there even into the afternoon over the southern areas, VFR to the north, and no change in the pattern here for Cook Inlet, south central Alaska. Quite an area of IFR they forecast for the Arctic coast, also out over the south central Bering Sea or the central Bering Sea, lifting north of the Pribilofs. Passes Anaktuvik, VFR, same forecast for Adigan. And Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR again, lowest on the eastern approaches of both passes with possible IFR, and then get back on the right side of it. Rainy should be VFR the entire day, possibly some marginal stuff on the eastern entrance tomorrow afternoon, but windy definitely will be VFR, as well as Isabel and Mentasta, wide open, Tanita, open, Portage, VFR, Chilkoot and White, VFR. Be some showers around for Chilkoot and White, but it'll be the VFR variety. And for the freezing level, here's southeast flow pulling a little bit milder air up, 4,000 feet actually getting a fair ways into the interior and northward, and 2,000 feet just out in advance of that coming over to the Pribilofs. Icing, areas of light mostly, maybe isolated moderate, above about 5,000 feet, Kodiak Island, North Gulf Coast, maybe the northern Panhandle. Scattered areas of icing possible here along the southwest coast, the Alaska Peninsula, and then farther out to the west. Jet stream well to the south, strongly across the Pacific, splits right in this area. Branch coming around upper level ridging here, southeast interior and the Panhandle. And for 9,000 feet southeast, pretty light here for the southeast coast into the interior. Light winds up to the Arctic coast, southeast 25, Kodiak Island, 15 to 20, and that's about it. And really 15 to 30 knot winds way out to the west, and that's about it wind-wise. 3,000 feet, maybe 25 knot east southeasterlies here along the North Gulf Coast, mostly from Cape Yakataga westward toward the Barren Islands, lighter in the interior, northeast, maybe up to 30 knots around Cape Lisburne, all the way down to the western Aleutians. And for turbulence, smooth. Eastern Arctic coast through the interior to the Gulf of Alaska, southeast coast, smooth tomorrow. Light to very isolated, probably no moderate chop, just light here, the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians. Light to isolated moderate there in the windier areas, western Brooks Range, right on down to St. Lawrence Island. And again, in the winds out over the far western Aleutians. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. As you well know, you can get forecast information for any day of the week. Today, tonight, tomorrow, out to 6 or 7 days. It includes the high and low temperature, the wind direction, the chance of rain or snow in your part of Alaska. But did you know that there is information available to forecast out to 2 weeks? So the question is, how would you use that information? And here to answer that question today and tell us a lot more about climate services from the U.S. National Weather Service Alaska region is Rick Thoman. He's the program manager for the Climate Science and Services. And Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
How would we use information that is out to 2 weeks instead of just the high and low and the chance of rain?
Well, Dave, as we move out in time, of course, forecasts become more uncertain. So as we move into that second week from now, we're not looking at specific highs or lows or precipitation amounts at any given place. What we can do with the state of the science at this point is get a handle on patterns. So we can say things like increased chances for stormy weather in the Bering Sea in 2 weeks, or we've been in a cold weather pattern. Looks like 8 to 10 days from now, that pattern's going to change. Those are the kind of forecasts that we can currently make in that second week.
So you're increasing lead time for perhaps big or small weather events and telling us the likelihood of maybe more coastal storms or wind events in some areas?
Those are the kinds of things that that we hope to be able to let Alaskans know in the second week forecast. And if you have an activity or an event that you would find that kind of advance notice useful, whether it's moving stuff off of the beach, whether to go out hunting or to come back from camp, those kind of decisions, the week 2 provides the opportunity for you to get a handle on that kind of information.
Okay. What other type of weather impacts that we're familiar with might Alaskans use climate services for?
Well, in the forecast realm, we can go provide some information from this week 2, say the 8 to 14 day period, on out to the monthly and even seasonal time scale. Now, those monthly seasonal forecasts are still kind of just really very much pattern dependent, and the amount of detail that we can provide at this point is still pretty limited. Generally, indications of how temperature and precipitation will fall in maybe above normal, below normal kind of range. But in the week 2 period, we can be considerably more specific than that as far as the general patterns and really the impacts on Alaskans.
Okay, so we would be talking about generalizations there that would tell us that the period might be more stormy, might be more hot, more dry, more cold, and situations like that.
That's correct. So we're not going to be able to say in which community, for instance, there's the threat of coastal flooding, but we can often be able to tell we're moving into a pattern that would be conducive to big Bering Sea storms. So if you're in an area that could potentially impact you, you'll want to pay attention to the weather forecast.
Okay. Now, every day and every hour of the day, the National Weather Service is working on a forecast for the next day. But how do you start your forecast process for that extended period that goes out beyond 7 days?
Well, the way things work right now, we start off with the expected general flow pattern for Alaska and the whole world, really, and then we narrow that down to Alaska. So we start off with the basic computer model forecast. There's quite a few different computer models that we look at, bring those together. And then another important part of that is we attempt to assess the confidence. The reality is often 2 weeks away, the computer models are very divergent. They have lots of different solutions, and that's an indication that we don't have much confidence. But when we see more agreement in that time frame, and when that agreement is a pattern that will be potentially very impactful for Alaska or is a big change from what we've been in, that's when we can then take that expected pattern. We have computer models forecasting it. We've assessed the confidence. Now we can move that forward. How? Using our experience as Alaskan weather forecasters, how does that typically play out for Alaska? So is this a stormy pattern for the Bering Sea? Is this an extra rainy period for Southeast? Is this the kind of pattern that generates strong winds potentially in the Anchorage Bowl? Is this a deep cold pattern for the interior? All of those are the kind of things that we're looking at in these large-scale patterns. That's very different than telling you that the winds on 10 days from now are going to be gusting to 120 on the hillside. We're looking for patterns, not the very specific information that the Weather Service will then hone in on as the event gets closer.
So the idea is to keep the 5, 6, 7 day forecast the same, where you are getting the standard high and low temperature and the chance of wind or rain, but further out you get a broad general forecast, but as the time gets closer to that event, we'll get a lot more specific.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. So how can people use this information if I am out in the bush and I want to see, is a coastal storm expected in my region, or is a chance for that improving over the next 2 to 3 weeks? Where could I go to get information like that?
When we see that potentially impactful or a big change in the weather is coming 8 to 14 days out, typically we will start to highlight that on the Weather Service Facebook site. We might produce a YouTube video highlighting that, linking that on our Facebook site. So often we don't, at this point, we don't have much to say in that because we're really looking for those forecasts of opportunities. But one thing we can say very likely as we go through the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be more and more of this kind of forecast information available in that week 2 time frame.
Okay, and something that emergency managers and city planners and folks in villages might be interested in keeping an eye out for, looking for that information to be headlined, whether that's on social media or perhaps through the National Weather Service channels there to get information from you to make better plans a little bit longer term and make better preparations in the event that things become a little bit more unsettled.
Absolutely. Climate Services with the National Weather Service Alaska region is talking to the state of Alaska every week, apprising them of that 2-week outlook. And on the social media side, we are working to keep Alaskans informed so that when we think we have some confidence in a high impact or a big change, that's the best way right now for folks to find out about that. Twitter, Facebook, so stay tuned to your National Weather Service.
Very good, a developing program. Rick Thoman with the National Weather Service Alaska region. He's the Climate Science and Services Program Manager. Thanks so much for joining us again, Rick, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Great, thanks Dave.
For another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. We'll see you next time.
Light wind day coming up for the inside waters all the way from Dixon Entrance on up to Lincoln on Glacier Bay. Looks like strongest will be up that way, southeast 15. Otherwise along the coast, not too bad, 15 to 20 out of the south side, and then southeast 20 knots with seas just 6 to 7 feet, so no small craft advisories at all. And then for Tuesday, that continues as well. We've got south winds on the extreme south coast, easterlies 15 to 20 northward. And now light northerly winds here for the northern panhandle, and then you can call that just light and variable for the central areas on down to the south. For the Prince William Sound zone, northeast 15, forecast tomorrow, easterlies at 20, eastern North Gulf Coast, and then we get into small craft advisories with even up to 30 knots there for the Barren Islands out of the east. Much lighter there across the south or east side of Kodiak Island, even Shelikof Strait, 15 knots. Small craft advisories, Katsumac Bay, 20 knots, southern Cook Inlet. Tuesday, northeast 15 for the inlet, east 15 Prince William Sound, southeast 15 light winds for the North Gulf Coast and Barrens as well as Kodiak Island. And for Bristol Bay, east at 20, southeast 15 across the peninsula all the way up to Sitkinak. And then for Tuesday, light winds south-southeast only at 10 knots with slight seas. And then for the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, southeast 15 on Alaska Island, Nikolsky westward, they get a little more squirrely, north to northeast 15 to 20 for the central Aleutians, and then up to 30 knots out toward Shemya. And that drops down a little bit, still carrying small crafts out there though, 20 knots west of Adak. Pretty light winds here for the central Aleutians, and then south to southwest 15 for the Fox Islands. Southwest coast, east-northeast 15 to 20 knots, up to 30 knots St. Lawrence Island, back down to 20 for St. Matthew. And then for Tuesday, small craft advisories here, St. Matthew Island on up to St. Lawrence Island, lighter winds for the Pribilofs, and the southwest coast kind of light and variable. For the Arctic coast, central and east side, the demarcation point, light north winds at 10, picking up to 20 knots, and then brisk wind advisories from Cape Beaufort all the way down to the Bering Strait. And that pattern drops off a little bit northeast, 10 or 20 to 25 here on the west side, still 10 knots on the central coast, eastward just 5 to 10 knot light north breezes, and that's about it. For the forecast for tonight, again, dry in the interior, variably cloudy, a lot of thick cirrus moving into the area now, and then clouds of the lower variety with flurries up along the Arctic coast and into the north slope, a certain extent windy northwest coast, on down to St. Lawrence Island, but back to the west. Rain with this front, but not much in the way of wind. Occasional light rain, Kodiak Island, up to the Kenai Peninsula, really light farther north. And then for tomorrow, whole system comes eastward there. Just a chance of light rain in the green shaded areas here. Nothing heavy at all expected. Sprinkles up to the north there with the heaviest amounts, which again won't be too heavy on the eastern slopes of the Alaska Range. Scattered showers North Gulf Coast into the Panhandle, where they're pretty isolated actually, and then looks like some good sunshine for much of the southeast coast on Tuesday, but this next system will begin to increase the clouds and wind in the afternoon. That's a look at the weather. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.